Hello, my beautiful Gemini. Welcome back. If this reading has found you today, maybe there is a reason your heart felt drawn here. Take a slow breath, settle into this moment, and simply allow yourself to receive whatever feels true for your journey. Not every message will belong to everyone, and that's perfectly okay. Keep what resonates. Let the rest drift away. Today, I feel like we're stepping into a story that has been quietly unfolding behind the scenes for much longer than you may realize. The first card resting on the table is the Knight of Cups, and immediately I get the feeling that someone never intended for this connection to become so meaningful. At first, everything may have felt easy, playful, even casual. Perhaps they convinced themselves that they could simply enjoy your company without letting their heart become too involved. They may have believed they were in complete control of their emotions. Yeah, that confidence doesn't seem quite as strong anymore. The more time they spent around you, the more something began to change. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it happened in small moments that probably seemed ordinary at the time. A conversation that stayed in their mind long after it ended, a smile they found themselves remembering for no reason. A quiet moment where they suddenly realized your presence brought them a kind of peace they hadn't been looking for, but somehow deeply needed. The Knight of Cups keeps returning to your energy, almost as though this person has been carrying words they haven't found the courage to speak yet. Not because the feelings aren't real, but because the feelings have become much bigger than they expected. Okay, now another card quietly slides beside it. The King of Pentacles. This changes the atmosphere completely. This doesn't feel like someone daydreaming about a temporary romance anymore. It feels like someone beginning to ask themselves questions they never thought they would ask. Questions about stability, questions about building a future, questions about whether one person could actually become home. I almost hear their thoughts saying, "Why am I thinking this far ahead?" Because maybe they didn't expect themselves to imagine what ordinary life would look like with you. Grocery shopping together, sitting in comfortable silence after a long day, growing older without feeling the need to become anyone else. Those aren't dramatic fantasies. They're surprisingly simple. And somehow, those simple visions may mean even more. The interesting part is that they probably haven't shared any of this with you. From the outside, they might still seem calm, practical, even slightly reserved. They could still be acting as though they're carefully measuring every step they take. But inside, something much deeper is beginning to take root. The Queen of Pentacles appears, and as soon as she arrives, I feel this quiet warmth surrounding your energy. It seems as though this person has started seeing you differently, not simply as someone they enjoy talking to or spending time with, but as someone whose presence feels safe. Someone whose energy creates comfort without asking for anything in return. There is something incredibly grounding about the way they experience you. Maybe they admire the way you care for people without needing recognition. Maybe they're inspired by your resilience. Maybe they're beginning to notice that whenever life feels uncertain, their thoughts somehow circle back to you. Not because you solved every problem, because your energy reminds them that peace still exists. That's a very different kind of attraction. It goes far beyond excitement or chemistry. It begins to touch the places where people quietly imagine forever. The next card waiting beneath the deck is the Moon, and I almost smile because it explains why so much has remained unspoken. There may be emotions moving beneath the surface that even they don't fully understand yet. Sometimes people hide their feelings from others. Sometimes they hide them from themselves. This almost feels like both. They may catch themselves imagining a future with you, only to quickly change the subject inside their own mind. They may picture introducing you to family, then immediately wonder why they allowed themselves to think that far ahead. They may imagine waking up beside you years from now, then laugh nervously because the thought arrived so naturally. But the thought keeps returning, again and again. The Moon seems to whisper that not every feeling is ready to be spoken out loud the moment it is born. Some emotions need quiet. They need time to settle. They need space to become undeniable. This person may still be standing in that space, trying to understand why your connection feels different from the others. trying to understand why your connection feels different from the others, trying to understand why their heart has started writing a future before their mind has agreed to read it. Oh my God! Sometimes the heart really does move faster than our plans. If you've sensed a little hesitation from them lately, it doesn't necessarily feel like a lack of feeling. It almost feels like they're carrying emotions that have grown larger than the words available to describe them. And perhaps that's why Spirit brought these 4 cards together today. The Knight of Cups carries the feeling. The King of Pentacles quietly imagines commitment. The Queen of Pentacles recognizes the person who feels like home. And the Moon gently reminds us that some of the deepest truths begin as beautiful secrets held inside the heart. There is still so much more unfolding beneath this connection, and as the cards continue opening, another layer begins to reveal itself. One that seems to explain why these growing feelings are changing this person from the inside out. The energy begins to soften as another group of cards quietly settles onto the table, and this feels much more personal than dramatic. It almost feels like someone sitting alone late at night, replaying conversations they wish had gone differently, not because they're trying to punish themselves, but because they're finally allowing themselves to be honest. The first card that catches my attention is the 5 of Cups. There is a heaviness here that doesn't seem connected to losing hope. It feels more like someone realizing that fear has cost them moments they can never recreate exactly the same way again. Sometimes people don't walk away because they don't care. Sometimes they step back because caring feels overwhelming. This person may have believed that creating distance would protect both of you. Maybe they thought if they kept their emotions contained, everything would stay manageable. But life has a quiet way of revealing what truly matters, especially after enough silence has settled between 2 hearts. Yeah, silence has a way of becoming a mirror. It reflects everything we tried not to see. The 8 of Pentacles appears beside the 5 of Cups, and I immediately feel determination replacing regret. This doesn't look like someone waiting for life to magically fix itself. It feels like someone waking up each morning asking themselves difficult questions. How can I become more emotionally available? Why did I react that way? Why did I hide instead of speaking honestly? Those aren't easy questions. They're the kind that require patience. The kind that slowly reshape a person from the inside. It almost feels as though they're rebuilding parts of themselves that were never properly understood before. Perhaps they're becoming more mindful of their habits. Maybe they're learning how to communicate instead of withdrawing. They could even be paying closer attention to their emotional well-being, realizing that healing isn't something that happens overnight. You know, real change is usually very quiet. Most people never see it happening. They only notice the person after they've already grown. The 4 of Pentacles rests nearby, and I don't read this as someone trying to control you. It feels more like someone who has spent a long time protecting their own heart. They may have carried old disappointments for years without realizing how much those experiences shaped the way they loved. Maybe they learned that vulnerability was dangerous. Maybe they convinced themselves that staying emotionally guarded was safer. Maybe they became so accustomed to holding everything inside that they forgot relationships aren't built through perfect self-control. They're built through trust. This person may still catch themselves wanting to hold back. There could be moments when they almost reach out, only to hesitate because an old fear quietly whispers that history might repeat itself. But something feels different now. Those old fears don't seem to have the same power they once did. Okay, that's actually a beautiful sign. Growth doesn't always erase fear. Sometimes it simply teaches us not to let fear make every decision. The card that seems to brighten the entire reading is the Star. The atmosphere changes the moment it appears. It feels gentle, hopeful, almost like someone opening the curtains after spending too much time in a dark room. This person may be starting to believe that love doesn't always have to end the way it once did. They may be allowing themselves to imagine healthier conversations, healthier choices, healthier ways of loving someone without constantly expecting disappointment. You might not even realize how much your own energy has inspired that shift. Not because you've tried to change them, simply because your presence seems to remind them that kindness still exists. Sometimes meeting one genuine soul quietly challenges years of limiting beliefs. I think that's part of what's happening here. Your connection seems to have become a mirror, but instead of only reflecting their fears, it's beginning to reflect the person they could become. The final card in this sequence is the Fool, and there's something wonderfully innocent about it. It doesn't feel reckless. It feels hopeful, like someone standing at the edge of a completely new chapter, realizing they don't have to carry every old wound into the future. Perhaps they're beginning to understand that love isn't about pretending to be perfect before returning. Maybe it's about becoming willing to show up honestly. There seems to be a quiet promise growing inside them, a promise that if they ever step back into your world, they don't want to repeat old patterns. They don't want conversations to end in confusion. They don't want fear to speak louder than their heart anymore. Could they still have moments of uncertainty? Of course. Healing rarely moves in a straight line. Some days probably feel lighter than others. Some mornings they may feel confident, while other evenings they wonder if they're already too late. But even those moments seem to be teaching them something valuable instead of pulling them backward. Oh my God! Sometimes that's how real transformation begins. Not with one dramatic decision, with hundreds of small ones made every single day. Choosing honesty over avoidance. Choosing growth over comfort. Choosing hope over fear. There is a quiet sense that this inner work isn't happening for appearances. It feels deeply personal, almost sacred, like someone carefully preparing their heart for the kind of future they once believed they could never have. The cards haven't finished telling this story yet, because another beautiful layer is waiting beneath the surface, one that begins to reveal just how often this person quietly imagines sharing an entire lifetime with you. The cards seem to grow even quieter here, almost as though they've stepped into a place that belongs only to the imagination. Not the kind of imagination that disappears after a pleasant daydream, but the kind that keeps returning when life slows down. This feels like someone who catches themselves smiling at thoughts they never planned to have. The first card waiting here is the Seven of Cups, and I don't sense confusion as much as I sense possibility. It's almost as though this person has started building little scenes in their mind without even realizing they're doing it. They could be driving home after work, making dinner, or lying awake before falling asleep. And suddenly your face appears in a future that feels strangely familiar. Maybe they picture introducing you to someone important in their life. Maybe they wonder what your laughter would sound like filling a home the two of you created together. Maybe they catch themselves imagining holidays, quiet weekends, little traditions that haven't even happened yet. The interesting thing is that these thoughts don't seem forced. They simply arrive. Yeah, sometimes the heart begins writing tomorrow before the mind has finished understanding today. The Four of Wands settles gently beside it, and the atmosphere becomes incredibly warm. There is something about this card that makes the energy feel welcoming, almost like opening the front door after a long journey and realizing you've finally found the place where you belong. This person may have spent years chasing excitement, achievement, or certainty, only to discover that what they truly long for is much simpler. They may want someone who feels peaceful, someone who feels safe enough to build ordinary days with. And somehow, Gemini, your energy keeps appearing in that picture. Not because everything would always be perfect, not because life would never become difficult, but because they seem to believe that even difficult days would feel lighter if they were shared with you. That is a very different kind of love. It's the kind that quietly asks, could we build something that lasts? Instead of asking, how exciting can this become? Okay, that's a beautiful shift. The cards seem to be showing someone whose definition of happiness is changing. The King of Pentacles returns, and it almost feels like he has been waiting for this moment. There is a quiet confidence growing inside this person, even if they haven't shown it yet. They're beginning to imagine what it would feel like to provide stability, consistency, and presence, rather than simply offering beautiful words. They may even find themselves paying closer attention to practical things lately. Thinking about career goals, financial security, long-term plans, not because they're suddenly becoming someone different, but because they're asking themselves whether the life they're building is worthy of the future they secretly hope to share with you. It's almost as if your connection has expanded their vision. Instead of planning only for themselves, they may be wondering how every decision could affect the life they might someday build alongside another soul. That's a very quiet transformation, but it feels incredibly meaningful. The Queen of Pentacles stands across from the King once again, and together they create an energy that feels balanced rather than dramatic. Looking at these two cards side by side, I almost get the feeling that this person has stopped searching for perfection. They're searching for partnership, someone they can laugh with on ordinary mornings, someone who makes an empty house feel alive, someone whose presence turns routine into something comforting. Perhaps that's why your energy keeps lingering in their heart. You don't simply appear in moments of excitement. You seem to appear in the peaceful moments too, the ones that usually reveal where love truly lives. Oh my God, those quiet moments often tell us more than grand romantic gestures ever could. Then the Ten of Cups gently reveals itself, and I honestly have to pause for a second, because the emotional warmth here is unmistakable. This doesn't feel like someone fantasizing about one perfect day. It feels like someone imagining years. Years of growing together. Years of learning each other. Years of celebrating small victories and comforting one another through difficult seasons. There could even be moments when they imagine things that would probably surprise you if you knew. What your home might look like. Where the two of you might travel. How your family traditions might blend together. What it would feel like to wake up beside the same person after decades and still feel grateful they chose to stay. Those thoughts seem almost accidental. They appear before this person has time to stop them. Then comes the funny part. As soon as they realize how serious those thoughts have become, they may quickly pull themselves back. They might shake their head, laugh quietly to themselves, tell themselves they're getting ahead of reality. Yet the images never seem to disappear completely. They simply return another day, another quiet evening, another peaceful moment. Almost as though their heart keeps reminding them of something their mind is still trying to process. There is also a gentle hesitation woven through these cards. This person may know exactly what they feel, but they still don't seem completely certain how those feelings should be spoken aloud. They could replay imaginary conversations where they finally tell you everything, only to wonder whether the timing is right or whether the words would come out the way they hope. Yeah, sometimes saying, "I love you" feels easier than saying, "I can actually picture spending my whole life with you." Those are very different confessions. One speaks about today, the other quietly reaches toward forever. The energy continues to deepen, and as another layer of the reading begins to unfold, it seems the cards are preparing to reveal why this person feels they can no longer keep living inside old chapters that no longer belong in their future. Something profound shifts as the next cards reveal themselves. The energy doesn't feel chaotic for the sake of being chaotic. It feels like standing in front of a doorway after carrying heavy bags for far too long, finally realizing that you don't have to bring everything with you. This person may be reaching a point where holding on to the past feels far more exhausting than letting it go. The first card resting at the center of the reading is Death, and it carries an incredibly quiet kind of courage. I don't see someone losing themselves here. I see someone slowly becoming the person they were always meant to be. There are habits that no longer fit, old fears that have started feeling too small for the future they're beginning to imagine. Even certain beliefs about love seem to be fading away. Sometimes growth doesn't arrive because we decide it's time. Sometimes life gently whispers, "You've outgrown this version of yourself." That seems to be exactly where this person is standing. They may be looking back at choices they once defended so confidently, only to realize those choices were made by someone who was still afraid. Afraid of vulnerability, afraid of disappointment, afraid that loving deeply would eventually lead to loss. Yeah, fear can become surprisingly convincing. It can make distance feel safer than closeness. It can make silence feel wiser than honesty. But eventually, fear begins asking for too much. The next card, the Tower, almost feels like the moment those old walls can no longer stay standing. At first glance, this kind of change might appear uncomfortable. There could be unexpected conversations, surprising realizations, or moments when everything they believed about themselves suddenly feels different. Yet I don't sense destruction here, I sense truth. There are times when life removes what we've been clinging to simply because it no longer reflects who we're becoming. Maybe this person has started recognizing that pretending not to care has never actually protected them. Maybe they've discovered that running from emotions didn't make those emotions disappear. It only delayed the moment they would finally have to face them. Oh my God. Facing yourself may be one of the bravest things anyone ever does. This awakening doesn't seem to happen all at once. It's almost like watching the sunrise. At first, only a little light appears. Then suddenly, the entire landscape looks different. The card of justice quietly joins the reading, and everything becomes remarkably clear. This person may be reaching a place where they're no longer blaming circumstances, timing, or other people for everything that happened. Instead, they seem willing to acknowledge their own part in the story. That kind of honesty changes everything. Not because it creates guilt, because it creates freedom. When we stop arguing with the truth, we finally have the chance to grow beyond it. There could be moments when they remember conversations they wish they had handled differently. Times they stayed silent when their heart wanted to speak. Opportunities they allowed to slip away because uncertainty felt easier than taking a risk. Those memories may still visit them, but instead of becoming chains, they seem to be becoming teachers. That's a beautiful difference. Pain that teaches eventually becomes wisdom. Pain that is ignored simply repeats itself. The cards almost seem to smile as Ace of Pentacles appears. After everything this person has been working through internally, this feels like the first glimpse of solid ground beneath their feet. It's almost as though they're beginning to believe that a different future really is possible. Not a perfect future, a genuine one. One built on honesty instead of assumptions, on consistency instead of uncertainty, on presence instead of emotional distance. I keep getting the feeling that they're becoming much more intentional. They may no longer be asking themselves whether they want love. They seem to be asking what kind of partner they truly want to become if love is placed in their hands again. That's a very mature question. It shifts the focus away from simply receiving happiness. It asks how they can help create it. The final card here is Three of Pentacles, and I love how quietly hopeful it feels. This doesn't look like someone dreaming from a distance anymore. It feels like someone beginning to understand that meaningful relationships aren't built through grand speeches alone. They're built one conversation at a time, one honest choice at a time, one moment of trust after another. This person may be imagining what it would feel like to rebuild something carefully instead of rushing, to listen more than they speak, to understand instead of assuming, to create a partnership where both people feel seen rather than simply admired. Maybe they finally realize that forever isn't created by one extraordinary day. It's created by thousands of ordinary days where two people continue choosing each other. Yeah, that's the kind of love these cards seem to be reaching toward. There is also a gentle sense that they don't want to arrive empty-handed. Not in a material sense, but emotionally. They seem to want to meet you with a heart that has learned something from every mistake, every disappointment, every lesson that brought them here. Perhaps they know they cannot rewrite yesterday, but they may be quietly preparing themselves to write tomorrow differently. The reading continues to deepen, and the next cards seem ready to uncover something this person has been protecting for a very long time. Feelings that are becoming far too powerful to remain hidden forever. There is a quiet tenderness surrounding these next cards, almost as though someone has been carrying a letter in their pocket for a very long time without ever finding the courage to unfold it. The words have existed for much longer than anyone realizes. They simply haven't found their voice yet. The first card turning over is the Ace of Swords, and it immediately feels like truth pressing gently against a closed door. This person may be reaching a point where keeping everything inside has become more difficult than speaking honestly. They may replay imaginary conversations over and over, wondering how to begin, wondering which sentence should come first, wondering whether there is any way to explain feelings that have been growing quietly for so long. Sometimes the hardest confession isn't saying, "I love you." Sometimes it's saying, I've loved you longer than I ever admitted, even to myself. That feels much closer to the energy surrounding this reading. There seems to be a desire to clear away every misunderstanding that silence has created. They may wish you could see everything that was happening behind the scenes. Every moment they almost reached out, every message they almost sent, every time they convinced themselves that waiting one more day somehow made more sense than risking rejection. Yeah, hearts can become surprisingly complicated when they care deeply. The King of Cups appears, and I almost feel this long exhale moving through the reading. This card doesn't seem loud. It doesn't demand attention. Instead, it carries the weight of emotions that have become steady with time, rather than fading away. This person may have discovered something unexpected. Their feelings didn't disappear while they stayed silent. They matured. What once felt like excitement has slowly transformed into something calmer, something deeper, something that doesn't need constant reassurance because it simply continues existing beneath the surface. That's a very different kind of love. It's the kind that remains present even during quiet seasons. The kind that quietly waits while someone learns how to become emotionally honest. Oh my God, sometimes love grows strongest in the places where no one else can see it. Looking at the Page of Pentacles, I keep sensing someone who wants to begin with something simple. They may not arrive with perfect speeches or dramatic declarations. They could be thinking about one honest message, one genuine conversation, one small step that finally breaks the distance that has existed for far too long. Perhaps they understand that rebuilding trust doesn't begin with promises, it begins with showing up, again and again. There is something incredibly sincere about this energy. They don't seem interested in pretending everything has always been easy. If anything, they may want to acknowledge the uncomfortable parts of the story, the moments they hesitated, the opportunities they allowed fear to steal, the times they made you question where you truly stood. Those memories don't seem easy for them to revisit. But avoiding them no longer feels like the right choice. The Knight of Swords suddenly brings movement into the reading, and I almost smile because it feels like the moment someone grows tired of arguing with their own heart. There may come a day when they simply decide that enough time has already been lost. Enough wondering, enough waiting, enough pretending that everything is fine. That doesn't necessarily mean every word will come out perfectly. Actually, I almost feel the opposite. If this conversation happens, it could be emotional. There might be pauses, nervous laughter, moments where they stop because they aren't sure how to continue. Honesty isn't always polished. Sometimes it's beautifully imperfect. Sometimes it's simply someone looking into another person's eyes and saying, I don't know the perfect way to explain this, but I need you to know what's been living inside my heart. That kind of vulnerability feels far more powerful than any rehearsed speech. The final card resting here is the Two of Cups, and the atmosphere becomes incredibly peaceful. This doesn't feel like winning someone's affection. It feels like finally allowing two hearts to stand in the same truth without hiding anymore. There is a beautiful sense of equality here. Not one person chasing, not one person running. Just two souls who may finally be ready to meet each other without masks. This person seems to be realizing that love was never asking them to become flawless. It was asking them to become authentic. Maybe that's why the apology they carry feels so heartfelt. Not because they believe saying sorry can erase the past, but because they hope honesty can become the first stone in a completely different foundation. I almost hear them quietly saying something like, I wish I had trusted what I felt sooner. I wish I hadn't let fear speak louder than my heart. I wish you knew how many times I almost told you everything. Those words may never sound exactly like that, but the feeling behind them seems remarkably genuine. There is also a softness that surprises me. This person doesn't appear focused on convincing you of anything. They seem more concerned with finally letting you see the version of themselves that has been hidden beneath hesitation all this time. Almost as though they believe you deserve the truth, regardless of what happens afterward. Yeah, that's real courage. Not speaking because you're guaranteed a certain outcome, speaking because your heart can no longer live comfortably inside silence. The cards become wonderfully still as this chapter comes to a close, and I can feel one final layer waiting patiently beneath the surface. A layer that seems ready to reveal the future this person has quietly chosen in their heart, even before they've found the courage to place it into words. The final cards arrive with a calm confidence that feels completely different from where this journey began. There is no rush here, no uncertainty pulling in opposite directions. Instead, it feels like someone who has spent enough time listening to their own heart that the answer has become beautifully simple. After all the questions, all the hesitation, and all the healing, this person seems to know exactly who they want standing beside them when they imagine the rest of their life. The first card to reveal itself is the Emperor, and I immediately sense someone stepping into a stronger version of themselves. Not stronger because they have all the answers, but because they're no longer allowing fear to make every important decision. There is a quiet determination surrounding them now. It feels like someone who wants their actions to finally reflect what their heart has known for quite some time. They may be thinking less about temporary emotions and more about lasting choices. What kind of partner do I want to become? What kind of life do I truly want to build? Who do I picture beside me when the years begin to pass? Those questions seem to have led them back to the same place every single time. Back to you. Yeah, sometimes clarity doesn't arrive because we find someone new. Sometimes it arrives because one person keeps remaining in our heart, no matter how many seasons come and go. The Empress quietly appears beside the Emperor, and together they create one of the warmest energies in the entire reading. Looking at these two cards together, I don't feel perfection. I feel balance. I feel two people who inspire one another to become more authentic, instead of pretending to be someone they're not. This person may no longer be searching for excitement alone. They seem to be searching for peace. The kind of peace that allows laughter to fill an ordinary kitchen. The kind of peace that turns a simple evening into a beautiful memory. The kind of peace that says, no matter what happens outside these walls, we'll face it together. Oh my God, that kind of love feels incredibly rare. It's not built on constant intensity, it's built on quiet consistency. The Four of Wands returns, almost like an old friend, but this time the energy feels even deeper. Earlier, the cards hinted at dreams and possibilities. Now those dreams seem to be taking on clearer shape. This person may find themselves wondering what commitment would actually look like in real life. Perhaps they've imagined introducing you as the person they're proud to walk beside. Perhaps they've pictured celebrating milestones together instead of separately. Maybe they've even caught themselves smiling while imagining a wedding they never thought they would seriously consider before, not because they're trying to rush anything, because the image simply feels natural. It's almost surprising to them how easily those thoughts arrive. There doesn't seem to be resistance anymore, only quiet acceptance. The Two of Cups gently reminds me that this isn't about one person carrying the entire relationship. It feels like mutual choice, mutual respect, mutual willingness to keep showing up even when life becomes complicated. This person may finally understand that love isn't measured by grand promises spoken once. It's measured by countless ordinary moments where two people continue choosing one another, choosing patience, choosing honesty, choosing forgiveness, choosing to stay curious about each other even after many years have passed. That's the kind of connection these cards seem to be blessing. The energy becomes even richer as Ten of Pentacles settles onto the table. I honestly smiled when this card appeared because it feels like the future has become something this person no longer fears imagining. Home doesn't seem like an abstract idea anymore. Home seems to have your energy. They may picture family dinners filled with comfortable conversations. They may imagine building traditions that belong only to the two of you. They may wonder what it would feel like to celebrate birthdays, holidays, quiet Sunday mornings, and all the little moments in between, with you still standing beside them. Life doesn't appear smaller when they imagine that future. It seems fuller, warmer, more meaningful. There is something incredibly touching about the simplicity of these visions. They're not chasing a fantasy that has to be flawless. They're longing for something real, something lasting, something worth protecting every single day. Then the final card turns over, Wheel of Fortune. The entire reading seems to exhale. It almost feels like this person has stopped asking whether meeting you was meaningful and started wondering how they can honor what this connection has awakened inside them. They may not believe every step of the journey has been easy, but they seem to recognize that every lesson has gently guided them toward a version of themselves capable of loving more honestly than before. Maybe life had to unfold exactly as it did for them to appreciate what truly matters. Maybe every delay carried a lesson they couldn't have learned any other way. Maybe every difficult chapter slowly prepared them for the commitment they're beginning to envision today. Of course, timing always has its own rhythm, and every person's path unfolds differently. No reading can promise exactly how events will happen or when they will unfold, but these cards seem to hold a quiet hope that feels remarkably sincere. They suggest someone who has stopped running from the future, someone who is no longer asking whether they're capable of commitment, someone whose heart keeps returning to the same gentle truth. If I build the rest of my life with anyone, I hope it's with you. Gemini, if this message found a place in your heart today, carry it gently. Let it be something to reflect on rather than something to force. Trust your own intuition above everything else, because your inner knowing will always be your most faithful guide. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You are deeply appreciated, and I truly hope this reading brought a little comfort, a little clarity, or simply a quiet moment of peace. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye for now.